Hi everyone, welcome to our third video. And today we'll be talking about chapter 6, arguing a position. And along with the video, I will be sending you a document with all my notes and all the quotes that I'm taking from the St. Martin's Guide so that you can kind of read along, right? With my notes as you listen to my lecture, right? Okay, so the first quote here that I'm going to read is just some questions, right, or positions, examples of positions um, in chapter 6, right? So here are the example positions, right, from chapter 6. Should parents think twice before signing up their kids for Little League, right? Might it not be a good idea for teens to get after-school jobs, right? Should hate speech be protected, right? Should you care about online privacy if you haven't done anything wrong? Right. So these are sort of examples of the positions that the sample essays, right, are sort of that they're posing, right. Um, and I will read more from the chapter here. A more thoughtful, deliberative kind of argument, one that depends on critical analysis of an issue and involves logical reasoning rather than raised voices, is more likely to convince others of the validity of your position. Reasoned argument is also more likely to be expected in college courses and in the workplace. Right. So key things here is thoughtful, deliberative, right, critical analysis, logical, right, reasoning. So basically, what this is describing, right, in terms of how your essay is going to look like, is that you're gonna need to do research, right? And you will pick your own topic, right? Pick your own position in relation to the topic, right? And then you're going to describe that, defend your position, right, using outside sources, right? And I will talk more about outside sources later on. So yeah, so you're going to take a position and then support that logically with evidence, right? Also known as your own research, right? So you also want to notice, right, that these questions, should parents think twice before signing up their kids for Little League, right? They're very specific, right? They're not sort of big questions like, is there a God, or, what is good, right? Or what is evil, right? They're not sort of abstract questions. They're very specific. They're specific to parents, right? Sort of thinking about signing up their kids, right, to Little League, right? So there is a sense here. So that's when you start choosing a topic, right? You want to make sure that you're being specific, right? And that will be the best way to defend your position, is to be as specific as possible, right? And we will talk more about that later. Right, so you might compose this thoughtful kind of argument for a variety of purposes and audiences and publish your efforts in a variety of media, right? So here, thinking about your reader, right? Obviously, I am your audience, right? So you're writing for me technically, but I want you to think of a larger sort of audience, right? Even if whether you say it that your audience is X, right, or even if you don't say it, right, I want you to imagine having an audience, right, so that you can really kind of um, I guess you can sort of frame your tone, right, as if you are addressing a specific kind of audience, right? Whether that be your fellow students, your faculty, right, administrators, or sort of um, millennials, right? You want to have a sense of a reader, a sense of an audience, so that you know sort of like who you're talking to, right? Right. So here, analyzing how these writers focus and frame their arguments to appeal to the hearts and minds of readers, anticipate and respond to opposing views, and select and present evidence, right? That will convince readers and refute objections, will help you see how you can employ these techniques to make your own position argument clear and compelling, right? So this is what this is basically saying, right? Is that on the one hand you're going to convince your readers based on sort of like emotional appeal, right? So like appealing to their emotions, um, appealing to um, their sympathy, perhaps, right? Um, appealing to certain beliefs that they might already sort of um, uh, that they might already have, right? Uh, on the one hand, but on the other hand, um, you also want to appeal through reason, right, and through evidence, and so you want to you know make it uh, convincing through through appealing to emotion, but then you also want it to be convincing by appealing through logic, right? Through logic and reason coming from your evidence and your research, right? So those are the two important ways, right? Okay, so these are all um, in the chapter, right? And I'm just going through the chapter and kind of elaborating on things that I find to be important. Um, and so I'm sorry if it's sounding repetitive, right? But I just want to sort of like point out important things. So for your main purpose, it should be change readers' minds by challenging their beliefs, right? Convince readers to look anew at the reasons or evidence, confirm the writer's refutation and possible objections, right? Strengthen readers' opinions by providing them with convincing arguments, move readers to take action by stressing the urgency or seriousness of the issue, right? Um, and the kind of reaction that you want out of your readers, right, is to have them thinking critically about the values and beliefs underlying their position, right? Re-examining the reasons and evidence, um, seriously considering the writer's refutation, considering an issue they had been certain about, right? Reconsidering an issue that they had been certain about. Inspiring readers to do something about the issue, right? So these sort of purpose, right, um, or this list of how you want your readers, or how you want your readers um, to react to your writing, right? You don't have to follow all of this, right? But reread them and kind of see um, what purpose you want to, so like pick two or three out of these, right? And kind of and model your essay based on what you've selected here, right? Okay, so for your main purpose, right, one says here, change readers' minds by challenging their beliefs, right? Convince readers to look anew at the reasons or evidence, right? And so part of what you're doing, right, is to acknowledge that a certain group of people, certain number of people think, uh, one way about an issue, right? And so your job then is to convince, right, these people um, who have opposing arguments as you, to sort of convince them, right, that it's actually worth thinking about changing their opinions, right? Or it's actually not, yes, so part of it is changing their opinions, right? But I think the more productive way of thinking about it is to offer them new evidence, right? To give them new information that will make them rethink their own sort of beliefs, right? Because it's really hard to just, do something or say something or write something to just change completely someone's opinions, because opinions are often sort of, they're a product of years, right, of indoctrination or ideology, right? So like it's not like it's not like someone will read an article and just like change their mind like that, right? But realistically, what your essay is going to do is offer evidence, strong evidence, right, that that will sort of address or that will speak to those who believe the opposing views, right, um, and make them reconsider their opinions, right, or if not reconsider their opinions, at least consider what you're offering them, right. Yeah, and in terms of how you want your readers to react, right? Um, you want to inspire your readers to do something about the issue, right? So um, part of the question that you want to answer, right? As you write your essay, right? Is the so what question? So what? Like, what's the point of you writing about this topic? Why do you think? So these are kind of like, these are very basic questions, but you want to address these questions, right? Going into as even before before you start composing, when you're just brainstorming for ideas, right? You want to ask yourself, why am I choosing this topic, right? And why is my position about this topic this way, right? Um, and then I'm going to write about it to convince people to believe me, right? Like, what's the point of you convincing them, right? What's the urgency in making people change their mind to believe what you believe, right? What's at stake, right? So yeah, like basic questions of what's the point, right? What's the point of you sort of offering these ideas, right? So those are just kind of general ideas of how the essay is supposed to look like, right? But as for basic features, right? And these are the things that I'm going to be looking for, right, when I read the essay. Um, so we have four basic features for this essay. One is a focused and well-presented issue, right? A well-supported position, an effective response to opposing views, right? A clear, logical organization, right? And I'm going to go through each one of that. Okay, so a focused, well-presented issue, right? Um, so first off, you're going to conduct a research, right? and you don't have to like read entire articles, right? If you already have a topic in mind, then good. But if you don't, read the samples, right? And find and like I said in my email, right, you can either choose to write about a theme in from Miss Saigon, right? You could, I guess, my position for the play was that um, um, Miss Saigon sort of follows this tropes, right, of representing uh, Asian characters, right, in a way that has been sort of used historically as kind of racist representations, right? So that's my sort of position, right, about Miss Saigon, right? And I was what I was doing in my last video, right, was pretty much sort of I picked a position, right, about how to interpret Miss Saigon, and then I sort of defended that position, right, by giving you a historical account, a historical evidence, right, as to why I think my position is a convincing one, right. Um, and so, yeah, you can pick themes, right, about Miss Saigon that you want to sort of write about and choose a position about, right? Or you can completely forget about Miss Saigon and pick your own topic, right? I especially want you to pick a topic that's interesting to you, right? I don't know, like social media, right? It seems like everyone's talking about social media, but just as an example, right? Are you for or against social media? But right, being for or against social media is very broad and very general, right? So you want um, to choose a very specific way of choosing a position in terms of social media, right? And so this could be about sort of privacy issues, right? You could sort of choose to um, be in the position where you want to criticize, um, uh, for example, Facebook, right? And how they use information from their users, right? So something specific like that, right? Not just like social media, good or bad, right? That's too broad. You want to be as specific as possible, right? But like I said, just play around with topics, and if you're not sure, feel free to just send me your topic, and then I can kind of help you. Um, I can help you sort of like develop, right, a position regarding whatever topic you want to write about, right? Um, okay, so the example that we have here, right, is um, this is from one of the readings, right? So here the position is why. This is also the title of the essay, which is also the position of the essay, right? So why privacy matters even if you have nothing to hide, right? Um, so the topic here, right, is privacy. Um, but notice how it's framed. It's framed around a specific sort of statement, right, or a specific uh, in a specific way, I guess, right? So why privacy matters even if you have nothing to hide, right? So right away you see that the author's position is that privacy matters, right? So for him, for the writer here, privacy matters, right? And then even if you have nothing to hide, right? So he is then identifying and opposing um, an opposing argument, right? Because some people have argued that, you know, I don't know, you probably kind of like heard it, right? That you don't care about surveillance from the government because you have nothing to hide, right? You're not doing anything illegal, right? So you're okay with surveillance, right? So that's kind of the argument of some people that, oh, I don't care if the government looks at my computer because I have nothing to hide, right? Um, so that's that kind of opposing argument, right? But for the writer here, he's saying that privacy actually matters, even if you have nothing to hide, because it's doing other things, right? And then he will then give you examples of what these other bad things, right, that surveillance can do, um, that can harm you in other ways, right? Even if you have nothing to hide, but the fact that they have access to your information, that can be used in other ways that will be not good for you, or for, you know, the idea of sort of privacy, right? Privacy of the individual that we value here in America, right? Um, so yeah, so this is how you want to sort of if you are in 1A, English 1A last quarter, um, I think the last paper that you were required um, to write about was explaining opposing points of view, right? So I'm sure like your instructor had you pick two opposing points of view, right? And then explain the one, and then explain the other, and explain why these points of view sort of how they came about, right? And so here you are pretty much doing the same thing. You want to find two points of view, right? So you want to find a topic that's interesting for you, and then you want to find uh, two opposing views about that topic, right? Same here. In this example, the topic is privacy, and then he has identified two opposing views about privacy, right? So one view is that privacy matters, right? And then the other view is privacy doesn't matter because I have nothing to hide, right? And then once you've identified those two opposing views, and then you pick a side, right? And then in this case, he chooses the side that privacy matters, right? And then he then goes on to support his argument by providing evidence of why he thinks privacy matters, even if you have nothing to hide, right? So that will be your first task, right? Is to identify your topic, and then to identify the opposing views about that topic, right? And then choose a side, right? Another way of framing this um, uh, your another way of framing your topic, right, is through this, and feel free to use this um, this example, right? So when X happens, most people think blank, blah blah blah, right? Whatever. Um, but I think blank because blank, right? So this is just an example, kind of like a rubric, right, of how you can kind of frame your your statement, your position, right? When X happens, most people think this, so that's the opposing view, right? But I think, right, that this is this because this is this, right? And so feel free to use this example to sort of fill in the blanks here. Um, And also feel free to use first person, especially for this paper, right? Because obviously you are giving your own position, right? So you'll really want to use the first person point of view. So I think, right? Blah blah blah, right? Okay. So the second basic feature, right, is a well-supported position. Right, so I'm quoting here, to argue effectively, writers need to assert an arguable position, an opinion, not a fact, that can be proved or disproved, or a belief that must be taken on faith. Right. They may also need to qualify that position, for example, by using words like may or by, specifying conditions, right? Um, to avoid making a claim that is too strong to be defended given the available evidence, right? So let's break this down. To argue effectively, writers need to assert an arguable position, right? So an opinion, not a fact, right? So you're posing an opinion, an arguable position, right? Which means that you're not stating a fact, because if you're stating a fact, the fact is a fact that no one can argue against, right? So there's no point in you arguing for like an already established fact, right? Because objectively that's already a fact. So there's no point in arguing, right? So um, so for example, right, privacy matters, right? So it's definitely like privacy as being important, right? Is an arguable opinion, right? Because some people don't care about being private, right? Other people do, right? And even though the government um, wants us to believe, right, that we have privacy, right, but they also need to sort of impinge in our privacy in order to control us, right? In order to help us, and also in order to control us, right? So that we're not doing things that are against the government, right? Um, and so there are many sort of positions, right, that is for or against this idea of privacy, right? And so um, as an arguable position, right? Privacy is a or choosing um, to to say that privacy is important, right, is a position that you can argue. um, right. So an opinion, not a fact, that can be proved or disproved, or a belief that must be taken on faith. And then they may also need to qualify that position, right? For example, by using words like may or by, specifying conditions, right? So it's also important. So like once you've chosen a side, right, you want to make it even more specific, right? Because you don't want to sort of generalize everyone, right? Because obviously people have different opinions, right? And even specific groups of people, right? Women as a group of people, right? Asians as a group of people, African Americans as a group of people, right? You don't want to just suggest that all Asians are like this, right? So you want to use words, right, that will make it clear that you are only speaking about a specific group of people, right? Um, and so one example here, right, um, is this essay by, let's see, by Stotsky. Children need to play, not to compete, right? So she's basically arguing here that there is something toxic, right, about pushing children to to sort of to this a very militaristic way of playing, right, or competing, right, sort of like children or pushing children to be competitive, right, at a very young age. She's arguing that that has a lot of sort of negative effects to the child, right, and that causes sort of certain kinds of trauma, right, that could impact the children or the child throughout adulthood, right. Um, so for Stotsky, um, she's talking about children, and then she's talking about parents, right? Um, Parents and coaches, right, who push children to be competitive, right? Um, but she makes a point to clarify, right, that um, here I'll read an example. When overzealous parents and coaches impose adult standards on children's sports, the result can be activities that are neither satisfying nor beneficial to children, right? And then the other example, I am concerned about all organized sports activities for children between the ages of 6 and 12, right? So the first one, when overzealous parents and coaches, right? So she's not just generalizing all parents and all coaches, right? Because I'm sure there are parents out there who are actually not like this, right? Or there are coaches who are actually very caring, right? And so she's making sure to point out that she's only talking about overzealous parents, right? Overzealous meaning overbearing or very, very eager parents, very pushy, very competitive parents and coaches, right? So she's only talking about, that very specific type of parents and coaches, right? Um, the result can be activities that are neither satisfying nor beneficial to the children, right? So by using "can be" here, um, again, she's telling us that the result doesn't, this result of the activities being neither satisfying nor beneficial, right? Um, it can happen, or it also cannot, or it may or may not happen, right? So by saying "can be," she's saying that this is kind of there is room for error here. She's recognizing that there is room for error, right? So she's not generalizing that the result of her research, right, is all of this, right? That the result is applies to everyone, or yeah. Okay, and then the second example, I am concerned about all organized sports activities for children between the ages of 6 and 12, right? So here she's making sure to point out that she's talking about children between the ages of 6 and 12, right? And so that specific age group of children, she thinks, are more susceptible to trauma um, when they are forced to, when they are forced to think competitively, right? Because if she just said children, then that could mean really young children, or sort of early teens, right? But in order not to, in order not to sort of assume too much about children, she's making sure to specify the age group that she's working with. Right. So, and part of a well-supported position, right, is a credible source, right? So, um, okay, let's talk about sources now. And so, for sources, um, I will give you a prompt tomorrow, right? A prompt. So I will that prompt will have like all the details of what I will be what I'll be looking for in essay one, right? what the requirements are, etc. But I'll mention this now, just to give you a heads up. So for this essay, you're required three outside sources, right? And then one has to be a scholarly journal, right? Which means that you will look for it either through Google Scholar or the UCR library, right? So you're going to look for articles. One article will need to come from either Google Scholar or UCR library website, right? And then the two other sources, they can be encyclopedia or newspaper or magazine articles, right? And you want also to be picky with what kind of magazines um, you want to cite, right? You want to choose reputable, quote unquote, reputable magazines and newspapers, right? And if you're not sure if the magazine or newspaper is reputable, just let me know, and then I'll let you know if it is or not. Right. So yeah. So those are the requirements. So I suggest, if you have a topic in mind, looking for looking for articles. So another basic feature that I will be looking for is an effective response to opposing views, right? So as I mentioned before, you want to identify your topic and then pick opposing views about that topic and then pick a side, right, that you want to argue for. But then that doesn't mean that you'll just forget about the opposite view, right? Part of this is to acknowledge that opposing view. So a part of your essay, and this is usually you'll do this sort of towards the end of the body part of your essay, right? So traditionally, your essay is like the first paragraph is the introduction, and then the last sentence or last two sentences of the introduction is your thesis, right? And then the body part usually has 3 or 4 paragraphs, right? Where you're going to provide, where you will sort of define your terms and then give examples, right? And then the last paragraph of the body of your essay, this is the paragraph before the conclusion, right? And just in case you're not familiar, right? So like a typical paper is usually structured, it's like a 5-paragraph structure, right? Where the first paragraph is introduction, and then the body part has 3 paragraphs within it, right? And then the last paragraph is the conclusion, right? So that's the kind of traditional structure of these argumentative essays, right? And feel free to follow that, right? But I'm not like strict about it. About like the number of, I'm not strict about the number of paragraphs, right? I want you still to follow that structure where you have introduction and then the body and then the conclusion, right? But I'm okay if you want to do like 2 paragraphs for the introduction, for example, right? And then you want to do like 4 or 5 smaller paragraphs within the body part, right? That's fine. That's not a big deal for me, right? But anyway, right, so an effective response to opposing views, right? So you've taken a position, and then now you want to recognize the opposing view, right? And that's usually, and the reason why we put that towards the end of the body paragraph is that we don't want that to overpower our argument, right? We want our argument, our position to be the highlight, to be at the center, right, of our paper. And so the opposing views, we have to recognize the opposing views, but we put that sort of like towards the bottom, right, so that it doesn't overpower our position, right? And so, right, so you've identified the opposing view, right? And you want to address that. You want to acknowledge it. That some people say that that privacy doesn't bother them because um, they have nothing to hide, right? And so there's two ways that you can address the opposing view, right? So one is through refutation, refute, to refute it, or to concede to it, right? Um, so through refutation, right? By refuting, it basically means you're saying that, oh, they're wrong and I'm right, right? Um, yeah, but then obviously you want to provide evidence of why you think they're just utterly wrong, right? And then why you think you're right. Um, but also another way of addressing the opposing view, right, is to concede, right, which means to say, which means to acknowledge that that opposing view might actually be right, also, right, um, but that you are approaching, or but that you are approaching the topic in a different way. Does that make sense? Like, so you're acknowledging that, yeah, this idea that I have nothing to hide, right? For example, you're conceding to this idea that that privacy doesn't matter to them because they have nothing to hide, right? So you can argue, right, that um, yeah, uh, that they have nothing to hide, so they have no that argument is not wrong, right? When you concede, you're saying that they're not wrong, right? But that you are providing other evidence about why you think your position is, I don't know, more correct, maybe, or that your position is stronger, right, than theirs. Even though you think that their position is also right, you want to make clear that your position is stronger, right? So you want to acknowledge that, yes, um, maybe you have nothing to hide, right? But and privacy doesn't matter to you. But then if you look at it in a different way, right, you could still be harmed, right, if you don't protect your privacy. Um, so yeah, so that's sort of like conceding, acknowledging that the opposing view is not wrong, but that your position is stronger, right, because you've given all of these evidence, right. Um, so that's also another part of your paper that I will be looking for, right, is to um, acknowledging, right, the opposing view. Okay, and so lastly, um, the last basic feature that I will be looking for is a clear and logical organization, right? So this means that I want you to use transitions, right? I want you to, like, when you're writing, you want to guide your reader, right, about what you're doing, right, where your argument is, where you're taking them, you know, um, where we're at now, right? So transitions are like markers, right? Using markers, conjunctions, right, throughout your paper is very important, right, in guiding your readers, right? Um, so these transitions are just, this is for example here. So highly organized competitive sports are too often played to adult standards, which are developmentally inappropriate for children and can be both physically and psychologically harmful. Right? Furthermore, they are actually counterproductive for developing either future players or fans. Finally, they provide occasions for some parents and coaches to place their own fantasies and needs ahead of children's welfare. Right. So a seemingly simple um, kind of set of sentences, right? But notice how she's using the words like the transitions, right? Like furthermore, finally, right? Um, so here, what these three sentences are doing, right, is sort of listing her arguments, right? So she has like three different sets of evidences that she's providing to argue that competitive sports is harmful for children of a certain age, right? So she has these three sets of evidence that she's listing here. And so she provided the one in the first sentence: highly organized competitive sports are too often played to adult standards, blah, 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 right? And then the second um, set of evidence, furthermore, right? So there's just the simple act of using furthermore, right? Furthermore, they are actually counterproductive for developing blah, 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 right? And then finally, right, so that's another transition, right? Finally, they provide occasions for some parents and coaches to place their own fantasies. And so, yes, like naturally we're already using these transitions, right? But I want you to understand what that's doing, right? So that you also understand why you should use transitions, right? And so what that's doing is sort of guiding the reader about where we are in terms of the argument, and then what's the relationship, right, between the first sentence, the second sentence, and the third sentence, right? Um, and alternatively, you can use sort of like numerical signals here, right? So first, highly organized, blah blah, and then second, they are actually counterproductive, and then third, they provide, right? So that's also, you can also do it that way, right? So it's up to you, but you want to give us this sort of transition words, right? To let us know that, this is one, this is two, this is three, right? Or how they're related to each other, right? And you can do this simply, right, by using words like, so supporting evidence, right? Like because or exceptions, however, right? And then, or when you're conceding, right, you'll say admittedly, right? For example, and then when you're refuting something, on the other hand, right? So therefore, first, finally, right? So things like, on the one hand, this is what's happening here, blah 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 blah. On the other hand, blah 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 blah. Right. So like these things, I actually I like using that kind of those transitions, right, to kind of to kind of like separate ideas, but also to provide what their relationship is to each other, right? So yeah, so use those transition words, right, throughout your paper. Also phrases like "in other words," right, or "to put it another way," right, or "according to, so and so's research," right. So like use these things. In other words, for example, right. In other words, I usually use towards the end of a paragraph, right, just to give like a little summary of what I've been talking about in that paragraph. So you provide, for example, in one of your paragraphs in the body of your essay, right, you're providing evidence, right, and then it's easy to confuse your readers sometimes. So sometimes it's helpful to just at the end of your paragraph, you want to give one sentence that just summarizes the main ideas of your entire paragraph, right? So you'll just say things like, last sentence, in other words, what I'm trying to say is blah, blah, blah. right? So that's one way to sort of clarify your um, your argument, right, by using these transition phrases. Right, so like I said, I will be sending you my notes, right, as because I'm reading my notes right now as I'm lecturing you. So I'm going to send you my notes along with the video so that you can look at the notes and see what I'm talking about, right? And so you can also see um, what where I'm quoting from the book, right? And hopefully that my notes will be helpful for you. And then tomorrow I will send you, tomorrow or Friday, I will send you the prompt for essay one, right? So uh, you'll have an idea of like what the requirements are, how long they need to be, what the format is, etc. So I'll give that to you tomorrow or Friday, and then I haven't decided yet if I'm going to require you to submit an outline, right? And the outline is just kind of a list, right, of what you're going to do, right? So you'll outline your introduction and then tell me what you're going to do in the introduction, right? So like one sentence um, on what you're going to talk about in the introduction, and then body paragraph. First paragraph of the body, right? This is what I'm going to talk about. Second paragraph, second evidence. Third paragraph, third evidence. Fourth paragraph, concession, right? Or refutation, right? And then fifth paragraph, conclusion, right? And then this is what I'm going to talk about, right? I haven't decided if I want to require that. I don't know, maybe not yet. I'm going to see, okay, so I'm not going to require an outline, but I will give you an example of an outline, and I want you to write an outline for yourself, right? Just so you have a guide when you're writing your paper, right? And if I see that, in our next paper, the second paper, if I see that a lot of you are having a hard time, organizing your essays, right? Or yeah, after I grade the first essay, if I see that a lot of you are having a difficult time organizing your paper, then I will require an outline for essay two, so that we have a guide, right? Yeah, I recommend it, but I'm not going to require you to submit an outline. Okay, so that's it for now, and I will email you if I have anything more to add. Right. So I hope that was helpful, and yeah, I'll see you in the next video.